2 minutes of Torah. This year is entitled, May One Invite a Gentile Over for a Yom Tov Meal. Received a wonderful shayla a few days ago where someone was asked to host a lone chayal for the Seder. So that's beautiful, but it was a bit tricky. The chayal is a righteous Gentile on his way to becoming a convert, but he didn't convert just yet. So that means having a Gentile, he's still a Gentile, over for a Yom Tov meal, for a Pesach meal. So there's one question regarding teaching Torah to a Gentile, but this is not a typical Gentile. He's learning with the Beit Din, with the Rabbanut. He's going through the whole conversion process and he's learning Torah. The prohibition to teach Torah to a Gentile is a very specific one, and then has to be analyzed what exactly the nature of the issur is, but it's not a typical issur when it's a Gentile who's converting. He's learning the basics of emunah and halacha so that he can be prepared as a convert. So let's not analyze that question for now. There's another question which often is off the radar, people are not aware of. There is a prohibition from the Torah to cook for a Gentile on Yom Tov. It says that Ochel nefesh is mutar lachem. A Jew could cook for a Jew, for himself and for the rest of his family, food on Yom Tov. Meaning, there's a prohibition from the Torah to cook on Yom Tov. We cannot cook on Yom Tov, but there's a permit if the cooking is for oneself, for a Jew, for the Jewish family, for Jewish friends and neighbors. That's the heter. It's not racist, nothing against Gentiles or anyone else, but there's a specific heter permit to cook for Jews. And that permit just isn't extended to other areas. A person can't cook food for anyone else, can't cook food for an animal on Yom Tov. There's a specific limited leniency. That's how the halacha was set up. So you'll say, that's not a problem here. I don't have a problem here when I'm inviting a Gentile to my Seder, to a Yom Tov meal. I'm cooking for the family. But wait a second. I didn't cook anything extra for him. I just cooked for the whole family. So two things. A, maybe I cooked something for him as well. I had him in mind. It's another person. And two, maybe there's a rabbinic issue. And the fact is, Siman Tov Kuf Yud Bet, in the Shulchan Aruch and Orach Chaim, in Hilchot Yom Tov, says the following. There's a prohibition to cook for a Gentile on Yom Tov. The permit is only for a Jew. That's number one. That seems to be biblical. And the rabbis extended this, and they said you cannot invite a Gentile over because you may cook for him. You may cook specially for him. And that's a prohibition. You invite a guest, it's only natural. You're going to want to entertain the guest properly and host him properly. So you can end up going ahead and what? Cooking for him. So the Mishnah Berurah and the Poskim will explain that if you're just cooking in one pot, so that's not considered a prohibition, because all the food that you put in, even if you're thinking of the Gentile, the food you're putting in is one big food, one big pot of food. It's for everyone. It's considered to be for the Jewish people there. And there's no one identifiable piece that's for him. Poskim also discuss the fact that it's all cooked in one pot. It enhances the flavor. The more food, the better. The real clear prohibition is I have a separate pot of food that I cook just for him. So it's clearly identifiable. I'm cooking that chicken, that meat, whatever it is, just for him. So this is very much halacha l'maisa. A person has a Gentile helper in the house, someone who's elderly, sick, not well. And then on Yom Tov, you cannot make eggs for that person. That's clear. When it's in one pot of food, then it's ready to discuss. But I cannot make eggs for him. So now the question is, what happens in our case? So in our case, it's interesting because this Yom Tov on Pesach, it was also Shabbat. So there's a svara to say, then Rav Rolsher brings us down in his book on Yom Tov, that when it's Yom Tov on Shabbat, I can't cook for anyone, not for Jews either. So there's no prohibition to invite a Gentile over on Yom Tov, that's Shabbat. So since Pesach was Shabbat, that was one heter, one permit to invite the Gentile over because it's Shabbat, I can't cook anyway. So the prohibition, the rabbinic prohibition of the gezerah that maybe I'll invite him doesn't apply. That maybe I'll invite him, maybe I'll cook for him doesn't apply. And also the Shulchan Aruch writes that it's where the Gentile just comes over, that's not a problem. It's only where I invite, so I feel the pressure. I have to make a beautiful meal for him, and maybe I'll forget and I'll cook a special food just from his own pot. But where someone just sent him over to me, then it's not like I'm looking to entertain and I might forget and end up cooking a separate food just for him. So based on those factors, there's room to be lenient in this specific case, where Pesach was on Shabbat, and also the host didn't invite. Someone said, "Can he please come over?" So those would be two reasons to be lenient in this case. But what do we come out from here? A prohibition from the Torah, it seems, to cook a separate pot of food for Gentile on Yom Tov. The permit is only a Jew to cook for the Jews. There's a prohibition from the rabbis to go ahead and invite a Gentile over because there's a fee. You're going to have a separate pot that you're going to cook just for him. 3, in our specific case, there may be room for leniency. A, because it was on Shabbat, Yom Tov was on Shabbat, and B, he didn't invite. Someone asked, can he just come over? And then finally, halacha l'maisa, someone has help in the house, Gentile help in the house on Yom Tov, then you, the Jew, cannot have a separate pot or pan or something where they're using to cook food just for the Gentile. There's no heta for that. The Gentile has to cook for himself. You have to, of course, take care of all the bishul akum issues, but you cannot cook. If you're already cooking your own meal, you could put extra in for the Gentiles. That's one big pot of food. The rabbis didn't ask for such a case. And since it's someone who's living in the house, that's not considered to be a guest where you're going to have, under pressure, cook a separate food. Shalom.